Hello. Hi. I'm actually an imposter. I don't work in government anymore, but when I was asked to do this, I was at GDS. I worked on a team that that did the performance platform, and I worked on renaming that. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my experiences of renaming service. So I've called the talk How to Name Your Service, but it's not really just about services. Names apply to all sorts of things in government. That could be team names, it could be policy names. It's a really great opportunity to show the value of content design to kind of the broader organisation. A little bit about how I learned naming. I learned naming while I was at Facebook, where I worked on a kind of naming new apps and products. If you see things called stories absolutely everywhere, that's partially my fault, so I apologise. So this is basically what I talk to go like short history of naming government, some general rules, how to run a name store, which is a specific technique for naming, and then a fun bit if I've got time. So, government loves to name things. Now, we know that. I think it's a bit of a power thing. It's kind of saying to people, hey, this is an important thing that you need to pay attention to. But the trouble is, you end up with things like this. This is one of the first experiences that many foreigners have with the UK government. I did check Google Trends just to make sure that they weren't onto something. Turns out that Visa for UK, spelled like that, is more popular in Russia, Turkey, and Algeria. So there might be something there, or maybe it's just that the users have learned the term in those countries. So this is the Magenta book. It outlines how thinking about evaluation before and during policy making can improve the quality of results produced to evaluate that policy. Not to be confused with the Green Book, which contains information for public health officials on immunisation. And sometimes we fancy ourselves as advertising copywriters, trying to kind of pique the user's interest as they walk down the street. What's in your backyard? You can kind of imagine it on the billboard. Probably not the right place for a government service. Government also loves acronyms. So much so that we actually force users to learn them, such as SORM, where now people don't even know what to call the real service because it's so strongly associated. And this classic magic, which is the multi-agency geographic information for the countryside, just in case you wanted to know. So, not brilliant. But things are getting better, and that's largely because GDS and a few other people have kind of started trying to come up with some rules around what we should call things. And as content designers, it's really our job to make sure those rules are enforced. But to do that, it helps to understand kind of the theory and the reasoning behind them. So I'm going to just quickly run through a few of the different types of names that you can have. So there's generic names, that's like everything, like an entire class of product. Government is a generic name. There are many governments all around the world. It's a type of thing. That's not really a proper name. You've got descriptive names, which do what they say on the tin. Check your state pension. Suggestive gives a kind of characteristic of the thing. So that what's in your backyard that I showed a minute ago, that would count as a suggestive name. Arbitrary names, those are kind of used a lot in the private sector because they're easy to trademark, things like Apple. The Magenta book is an arbitrary name. It doesn't have, the name has nothing to do with what the thing is at all. And then finally you have fanciful names, which have no other meaning at all apart from the one we give it. So SORM, a lot of the acronym names are fanciful names, although calling them fanciful seems slightly strange to me. But they're not real words, they're just things that we've kind of made up. So hopefully by now you've all seen this poster around, which is good services are verbs, bad services are nouns. And to go with that, we should only ever use descriptive names. We need to describe what the thing is and what it is for. And it's worth saying at this point that naming is hard. Finding the right name takes time, and you need to make sure that everyone involved in the project is happy with it for it to stick. So something as a content designer you need to do is set expectations around how much work this is going to be. It's not something you do right at the end of the project in a kind of an afternoon. It's something that needs serious thought. Make sure that you've written a mission statement before you engage with the naming process. It will be your guide. It kind of acts as a bit of a map to help you figure out what the name should be. But once you've got that, there's a kind of a specific technique that you can run I learned when I was at Facebook called a name storm. And that's a time-boxed workshop designed to help teams find and agree on a name for their business, product or service. So this is, you get everybody together in a room, as many people as possible. It really doesn't matter. It's good to, the team should definitely be there for certain. It's nice to get external writers who maybe don't know so much about the project to get their views. Also, if you can get kind of stakeholders, that's really good because it'll help generate buy-in. Basically, the name storm is as much about getting people to feel comfortable with the name that they've chosen as it is actually picking the name. Having external people is also really helpful. When we came up with the cross-government service data as the new name for Performance Platform, it was actually Angus, the creative writer from the services programme, that came up with that, so we wouldn't have done that without him. In total, it should take about 90 minutes. You need to time box it, otherwise it will drag on and people will go crazy. So start off by getting your researcher to remind the group of the user needs, and if you've got a persona, who the persona is, make sure the team know exactly who they're kind of naming it for before you begin. This is the persona for Anna, who was the kind of the key user of cross-government service data that we created through activity theory. That should literally take 15 minutes. Hopefully everyone that's there should be slightly familiar with what the purpose of the workshop is. Then you need to spend 15 minutes brainstorming the names individually, so that no sharing, it's fine to duplicate. The idea is to go for quantity rather than quality, and write multiple notes. Once you've got kind of all of them written down, you should have a big massive post-it notes that you can stick up on the wall so that everyone feels that their idea has been acknowledged and that they've kind of had a chance to influence the process. Once you've done that, as a team, you need to come up with some characteristics that the name needs to have. So, that should be based on your research, but you need to also include some other things, like not confusing existing concepts. So, if you've already got something that's called the Magenta Book, don't call it the Also Magenta Book or whatever. As it is government, one of the characteristics needs to be that it's descriptive, that it's self-explanatory. So once you've got those criteria established, you can just remove the names. So you can see here that we've kind of stuck underneath each criteria the names that were eliminated by that. That takes roughly 20 minutes. Eventually you'll have a selection of names that meet the criteria. Then you need to kind of group them and discuss. You can see that we had a couple of different concepts. We've got on the left here something about kind of service data. On the right we had something about analytics and analysis tool. And then we had somewhere in the middle something about performance frameworks. So you need to kind of discuss those for roughly about 20 minutes, and then get people to vote the individual names that they like the best. I find about 3 votes is a big number. Eliminate everything that isn't the top 2 or 3, depending on how the dot vote falls, and have someone from the group advocate for each. If you can't find an advocate for a particular name, just chuck out the process straight away. At this point, it makes sense to kind of write it in context. So, this was our kind of mission statement about cross-government service data, letting civil servants get data about government services. And so we just kind of framed it up as a quick phrase, like, have you heard about the website? It's a new tool that, that's really helpful for seeing what's going to work and what isn't going to work. Strive for consensus, discuss it within a group, try and get everyone on the same page if you can. But when it comes down to it, if you haven't got consensus by the end of the 20 minutes, force a vote to get one picked. And then test it. So be ready to change it if it doesn't. Be ready to change it if it doesn't work. So you can see up there, the best way to test a name is in the actual thing that you're doing. So you see up there like cross-government service data. You can then show this page to people and be like, what do you think this is before you click on that and you know about it. The great thing about the name storming process is that in the event that the name you've picked doesn't work, you've already got a ready-made shortlist of other things to try, so that's quite nice. So, the fun bit, do just about have time for that. So, I had a brief from the team that run ConCon that they need a new name that's a bit more descriptive. Now, we don't have time to group brainstorm with 300 people, so I've asked the GovUK content team to come up with a list, which looks something like this. You probably can't see all of them. It's okay, you don't need to. You can see some of them. So there's some great names in there, like Content United, Word Party, the biannual gathering of government internet content practitioners 2017 Part 1. Content Designers Therapy Session, which seems fairly apt. So once you've got those names, establish your criteria. So I've chosen these criteria, and they're fairly simple. You need to make clear it's about content, it needs to make clear it's a conference, it needs to make clear it's for government, it needs to be seen as valuable by the rest of government, and it needs to not confuse something that already exists. So it needs to make clear it's about content. All the ones that are highlighted in red, ones that I've said don't meet that criteria. So we have to lose Government Gabfest and Same Thing On. Now we need to make clear it's a conference, so unfortunately, Content Palooza, now that's what I call content. And nice idea, #GovContent, which I quite enjoyed as an idea for a name for a conference, but that doesn't actually work in practice. Then we need to make clear that it's a conference, which sadly means we have to lose the Persis Howell Memorial Content Conference. Sorry, Persis. Great, right. And then we need to make sure that the rest of the government sees value in it. Although there are some great hubris names there, I don't think that the rest of the government is going to let you guys attend if we invite you along to the Intragovernmental Cyber Content Symposium. So, probably going to have to get rid of that, unfortunately. And then finally, it shouldn't confuse an existing concept. So there are already some kind of content conferences out there, like Content Confab, or called Confab and Agile Content. So we're going to take those out, so there's no risk of confusion. So normally we would dot vote, but we don't have time again for everyone to come up here and put their dots. So I did a poll of the GovUK content team, and this is what we got. So the favourite was Cross-Government Content Conference, then Government Content Community Conference, and then Content Community Conference. I think that's right. And so now it's your turn. I'm going to ask you to applaud for the name that you prefer. So, can I get a round of applause for the Cross-Government Content Conference? Okay, the Government Content Community Conference. Quieter, but okay, still. And then the Content Community Conference. So the winner is, I think, well, one academic Government Content Conference. Does anyone have any questions? Got one upstairs? Is that okay?
So you talked about at the beginning how government's got a long history of naming things in strange ways. But one of the things about the way that government has named things is out of sort of almost catchiness, like Swan. Like we start talking about it in our team, and then it starts to make sense. Not that I was now where we have lots of kind of catch coming up with that, but I imagine that's what happened. Like people started talking about that in the team. More these words that are easier to talk about.
Cool, yeah, it's a great question. So, team names often become product names. To avoid this at Facebook, we actually used to call our teams like the red team or the blue team or whatever until we had figured out what to call it, because it shapes the mental model of the entire product. I think that it may be that, longer names are a bit of a mouthful, but, we found that referring to ourselves as the Cross-Government Service Data Team was okay. Like, it was maybe not quite as snappy as Performance Platform, but it was okay. And the kind of the benefits that you get from having a sensible name outweighs it. Naming is just a series of trade-offs. You've got to decide kind of which things are important to you. And I would say for government, having a slightly wordy way to talk about it internally is better than if it means that it's a better user experience. Also, it has the additional benefit of making it easy for new people that's joining to quickly understand what team is what and what's going on. Someone over there?
There's actually an orange book.
Didn't know that.
And we said to them, that's not a great name. I don't know what the orange book is. And they did explain what it was. I've forgotten. But their biggest thing was, well, this is the 42nd edition of the orange book. And there's no way it can't not be called the orange book. And everything was branded orange. They also already commissioned the publishing of said book. So there really wasn't much we could do about it. But I'm just wondering when it's a sort of historic thing, is there, other than just giving the evidence, is there anything else you could recommend to do?
Yeah, so, a lot of the names in government, or problematic names, are going to be historic things. I think that's kind of one of the nice things about doing something like a name scoring process, where, it's perfectly possible to include the orange book in the process to make sure that's kind of been accepted. It really helps the teams to understand that it doesn't meet their own criteria. In the example I did, I came up with a criteria. Normally you would come up with them as part of a team so that they feel they own the criteria, and then they end up ruling their own name out of scope based on their own criteria, and it's quite hard for them to argue against themselves. I think we're out of time, so thank you.